breach no longer requires analysis of harm. The new definition of breach has a 4-part assessment to determine the probability that PHI was compromised. The definition of breach is in subpart D. Breach means an unpermitted acquisition, access, use, or disclosure that compromises the security or privacy of PHI. The definition has a 3-part test for excluding trivial events. Then a breach is presumed unless the entity demonstrates a low probability that PHI was compromised by assessing probability according to 4 or more factors. The original definition of breach asked whether there was a significant risk of harm to the individual. The final definition requires entities to assess the probability that PHI was compromised. The first step in the analysis is legal. Review the relevant section of the privacy rule. Next, determine if the person was doing their job. Did they access PHI in good faith, or were they snooping? Determine if the worker disclosed PHI to anyone else. Did the person inadvertently disclose PHI within the same organization? If so, make sure there were no further disclosures. If PHI was disclosed to a person not authorized to see it, assess the person's ability to retain the information. If there's no exclusion, then a breach is presumed unless the 4-step analysis proves otherwise. The first step is to examine the nature and extent of PHI involved. Second, examine the person who used or received PHI without authorization. Third, estimate the likelihood that PHI was actually acquired or viewed. And fourth, assess the extent of mitigation already accomplished. Now we'll investigate whether a breach occurred in the town of Single Peak. Darla, Pete's daughter, is practicing for the Bike Fiesta. This is a charity event for children's health. Bike Fiesta is sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce and the merchants, including the coffee house. All of the proceeds will be donated to Single Peak Hospital. Gail, Computer Guy's girlfriend, is a member of the hospital fundraising committee. She also works for the local newspaper.
Gail, what are you doing with that spreadsheet?
I'm asking people to support the Bike Fiesta.
Are you raising funds for the hospital?
Yes, they asked me to sign a business associate contract so that I could use this spreadsheet to help them promote the event.
Are you going to call everyone on the list?
No, we have to give individuals an opportunity to elect not to receive fundraising communications. People in this column have already opted out, but other people have volunteered to organize races and other contests. Pete has already talked to kids in Darla's classroom. He signed an authorization that allows her to disclose medical records to promote the fiesta. Did you know Darla has leukemia? Pete is helping me write a story about Darla and childhood cancer.
That's a great way to encourage donations for the hospital. We'll publish this story in tomorrow's paper.
A couple days later, Gail went to lunch at the coffee house. She had a meeting with Scarlett, the business manager.
I really like the story you wrote about Darla.
Could you interview more kids like her? Stories like that will bring in more sponsors.
My spreadsheet only has fundraising information. It's limited to 6 categories of data.
Maybe your friend Faye, the hospital pharmacist, could round up more people. She has contact with a lot of patients in the hospital. Look, I see her name on the hospital website. You should call her or send her an email. She could review names on the spreadsheet and suggest stories you could write.
That's a good idea. I'll send an email to Faye.
The email to Faye was puzzling. Faye didn't know what to think. But a few minutes later, Pete arrived with his daughter.
Hi, Pete. I heard you were an expert on HIPAA privacy.
Well, I used to manage Dr. Pruitt's medical office.
Could I get your opinion on a possible breach of privacy? You know my friend Gail. She sent me a spreadsheet with names of hospital patients. It has information about Darla. Gail asked me to identify people who could help advertise the bike fiesta.
Are you a member of the fundraising committee?
No, but I would like to help Gail raise money for the hospital. Do you think this email was a privacy breach?
We'd have to know what Gail was permitted to disclose. The hospital should have a contract or some kind of fundraising arrangement.
So you're saying I shouldn't presume the email was a breach?
That's right. Consider the fact that you are a member of the hospital workforce. I assume you accessed the spreadsheet in good faith, right? And you haven't sent the email to anyone else?
That's right.
So there's no breach according to the HIPAA definition.
Would it be alright if I discussed the bike fiesta with patients?
There's nothing wrong with answering questions about the poster, but individuals have the right to be left alone. I suggest you talk to the hospital privacy officer and ask for more guidelines.
Thanks, Pete.
Sometimes breach is obvious, other times you have to do the analysis. The risk of harm test is no longer part of HIPAA. Once breach is presumed, there is a 4-part analysis to determine the overall probability that the PHI has been compromised. Thanks for watching. We have more tutorials coming. Thank you in advance for comments and suggestions.